Good afternoon, everyone. This is Steve Zamaki of Automatec. We'll be starting the webinar in about 1.5 to 2 minutes. Thank you all for joining. So we've got lots of folks that are joining. So again, we'll be starting in about 1 to 2 minutes. Thank you. So just for everyone that is on the webinar here, thanks for joining. This is Steve Zamaki of Automatec, and we'll be starting in a minute or two. And everyone's going to be muted. So logistics wise, everyone will be muted. And then what we will do is we'll be monitoring the chat for questions. And then at the end, we'll be answering the questions. And then we'll finish up in about 45 minutes or so. And then we'll have Rachel talk about who is a sommelier, talking about the wine. And in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to her, and she'll have a couple words. She'll have a couple words about the wine and making sure to open it up in a moment. So. All right, we'll go 1 more minute and then we will officially start. Get some more folks that are joining. All right, so again, this is Steve Zamaki of Automatec. Thank you everyone for joining on this this happy Thursday. And we're going to get started with the Simplicity and Historian webinar and running those applications in high availability environments. So pretty cool stuff. Before we begin, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, and she'll have a couple of comments for us about the wine. So Rachel, are you there?
Hi, Steve. Yeah, thanks for having me for another wine tasting. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's a fun way to unwind. I know Thursday, I think everybody's definitely ready for a glass of wine. So I'm excited to talk about the wine that we have today. One of my favorites, probably my favorite Italian red, definitely my favorite Italian red, but one of my favorite wines in general. So if you have your wine, if you registered well enough in advance that you have it, I'd recommend opening it to enjoy throughout the presentation today. We're going to talk about it a bit later. So what we're tasting through today is a Barolo. Again, I'm going to talk more in depth about the wine later in the presentation, but it's definitely a wine that benefits from getting some air, right? Being oxygenated. It's a wine that has a lot of tannin. So by opening it now, you're going to just let it breathe, and you're going to let those tannins kind of mellow out and drop out and allow some of that fruit to come forward. So if you have your wine, open it, pour yourself about 2 ounces. Again, we're going to talk through it later. If you just registered and you have any other kind of wine, or you registered and you haven't received it yet, you can open whatever wine you have. I'm going to open it up for questions at the end of my presentation as well. So you can ask me questions about anything really. So just enjoy the presentation, and I'll see everybody towards the end.
Sounds great. Rachel, thanks a lot. And thanks for being a rock star on wine. I know I'm already getting hit on my phone with people saying 2 ounces is not enough. So if you want to put more in your glass, feel free. So, hey, everyone on the webinar, again, many thanks for your time. So I'm really excited about today. We've got some awesome panelists that are some of the world's smartest people on simplicity and historian products. So we've got Jimmy Felice, who has, no offense, Jimmy, been in the industry a number of years. And he's the senior product manager with GE Digital. We got Doug Stewart, who is a senior software architect and borderline demigod when it comes to SCADA architectures and the development of SCADA products. And Tom Jensen, who's part of the team at Automatec, who's one of our solution architects. And Tom has lots of application knowledge, lots of wisdom, And this team is truly some of the smartest people in the world when it comes to deploying simplicity in high availability, high complex environments. And so we've got a great session lined up for this afternoon. So thanks. So we're quickly just thanks, Jimmy, for flipping. We're going to talk just a couple of slides about Automatec, but we really want to spend the majority of the time on Simplicity Historian. We're going to talk about high availability, a little bit of OT security, and then we'll be doing some wrap up with some questions. And then we're going to kick it back to Rachel, who's going to talk about the wine. Next slide, Jimmy. One more, there we go. So some of the problems that Automatec solves as a company, we're very in tune with throughput, quality, regulatory compliance, sustainability, how we help customers with workforce productivity. And those are the things we increase. What we help customers decrease in some of the business outcomes that we drive towards are cost, risk, time to market, and OT security. On the right-hand side, this is just kind of a quick summary of who Automatec is in the land of the customers and communities that we really drive. So if you drove to work, used a computer, drank a glass of water, coffee, ate a cranberry, changed a diaper, et cetera, received a vaccine, applied makeup, visited a hospital, et cetera, you and your families and communities have benefited from an Automatec solution. Next slide. So what do we provide to the market? At the end of the day, we are a controls company. We're a SCADA company. We provide MES solutions, industrial internet of cloud solutions, hardware and system architecture, and OT and cybersecurity solutions. So we get called from customers all the time around these types of solutions. And it's important to note that Simplicity and Historian are really part of those first two buckets on the left-hand side. And if you do have questions around anything to do with SCADA, redundant architectures, high availability environments, running in secure environments, just give us a call. We're here to help. Next slide. So a couple things about our footprint. So we're part of KKR, one of the third largest private equity groups in the world. Automatec as a group, we've been around for almost 25 plus years. We are GE's largest and licensed supplier of SCADA solutions, and we have probably the most experienced SCADA solution architects and engineering support teams in North America. So again, let us know if you have any questions. We also work very closely with a handful of wonderful solution providers and systems integrators who are trained and experienced in deploying Simplicity. And we also have training and services and technical workshops and user conferences and those types of value add services that we provide to customers. Next slide. And with that, Jimmy, it's all yours. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
All good.
All good. Great. So yeah, thanks, Steve, and thanks everyone for joining today. I did want to start with just a little housekeeping in that we do have some future-looking items in our presentation today. So we're going to be talking about the things that we just finished releasing this week. But we also will do a little bit of kind of forward-looking. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that anything forward-looking is subject to change. So I kind of wanted to just start off by kind of looking at Simplicity and really kind of emphasizing that, yes, it's been around a while, which is a good thing. It's very stable, secure platform. And we have continued to innovate through the years, even things like updating our graphics, several years ago, which is something we're looking at again. But a lot of different things that we've done through the years. So over the years. So one of the things I wanted to start with is we do have a poll question that we'd like you guys to answer, just to kind of get a feel for what versions you guys are currently using. So if you can handle that, thank you.
So what version of Simplicity are you currently running? I'll give it another 10 seconds here. Okay.
All right, thank you.
And
Well, that's actually pretty cool. It looks like we do have a few people on older versions, but a lot are on our more recent versions. Thanks for that. So kind of, as mentioned, we continue to innovate, add new capabilities, and modernize the platform. Just something to kind of highlight. We have even over the last couple of releases. So that eye chart went up until about version 11, but in the last couple of versions, we've introduced several capabilities, including things like a new web-based tool for automatically discovering and building OPC UA. We're continually modernizing our HMI with things like integration with our operations hub, just in general, reducing the time it takes to help, to build your HMI screens, reducing things like the need for scripting. Hopefully you guys have seen that in some of the recent releases where we've basically taken common activities that you used to use scripts for and turned them into standard features in the solution as well. Again, all with that goal of reducing the time it takes to build your HMI system. We've added things. We continue to support all the latest versions of Windows and SQL and things like that. So we've even added things like SQL Always On support. And ultimately with our web space and operations hub tool, we continue to make our displays available remotely through different applications on your mobile phones, tablets, and things like that. So kind of looking at, as mentioned, we actually just released the latest version of Simplicity this week. So you guys should be getting some notice on that very soon. So what we've been doing as a business, the value of our Simplicity software extends beyond Simplicity. I know some of you guys use Historian. Some of you started looking at Operations Hub, but one of the things that we're really trying to do is to release our products as a portfolio at once. And the benefits of that are, for our customers is really so that we can continue to improve the experience as you leverage more and more of our capabilities in your solutions. Kind of just taking a step back on Simplicity and just, I think most people on this call probably know most of the capabilities, but I just kind of wanted to kind of do a quick rundown of just some of the other things that we do have. Obviously Simplicity is an HMI SCADA solution. So that ultimately means we're going to collect a whole bunch of data real time, aggregate it, and make it available to the clients. With that comes things like alarming and other tools that, help you from the control aspect. We also do have some other capabilities that you may or may not be aware of, including things like reporting or alarm notification, remote access through things like web space, and we'll talk a little bit about a new capability within Ops Hub as well as part of our tools. In terms of our Operations Hub is a tool that lets you build web-based applications quickly. Connectivity is obviously important, and of course, Historian is a big part of a SCADA system because you typically do want that history. When I look at, again, just some of the core capabilities on the SCADA side, things like alarm management are obviously key, but we do have some pretty cool technology. Some of it's been there a while and just a lot of people don't know about it. I think, Steve, you called it our best kept secret, which is probably true. Things like our digital graphic replay, you can actually take your historian data and use that, leveraging your existing displays to animate something that happened in the past. So you can turn the clock back and look at your displays as they would have looked, an hour ago when an incident happened, for example. From a development perspective, powerful tools. I know a lot of people do leverage our classes and objects for modeling out your system, which really makes it, especially if you got a lot of repeatable development screens, repeatable devices that you're adding to the system, it really helps build up applications quickly from that perspective. And then extensibility, you'll see there's a word there called Python, and we'll go into a little more detail on that. We did just add Python to the latest release, so we'll go into some details on that. And then scalability, this is another area where Simplicity really excels. It can live on a very small device with a small footprint, all the way to enterprise SCADA systems that have 500,000 tags or more. So again, just wanted to highlight some of those core things as a reminder, or you might see something you didn't realize we had and you have access to. I'm kind of just sort of setting the stage a little bit here. In terms of just our overall strategy as we start to, as we build out our solution into the future, including the release that we just had, these are just sort of the core areas that we are focused. One of them is around connecting the worker. So that means it's not just the traditional way anymore, where you just had your operator displays. People are more mobile now. So being able to extend it out to that mobile workforce is important. We understand our customers have challenges with managing their applications. So again, some focus on how do we help you reduce the effort it takes to manage those systems. And then looking at it from an enterprise level, so depending on your application, you may have one or you may have many, where can we help you really pull that data up and get a more holistic enterprise view of your operations. So these are some of the things that drive our automation strategy, including Simplicity. In terms of where we're focused sort of in a little more detail, it's about building the system faster. We talked a little bit about that already. From a SCADA perspective, continue to help you build your displays faster, increasing productivity through some central management capabilities. This is some of the things we will be working on for next release. And some things that a lot of customers are trying to do these days, if they do have multiple systems, is getting that central view of those systems. So rather than having a whole bunch of control centers, having a central one where you can reach into those individual sites as needed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new in the version we just released. And I'm joined also by Doug, as Steve said, who is our software architect for Simplicity and knows everything inside out. So you can start, putting your questions in the chat. So just some of the focuses again for Simplicity 2022. It was a bit of a shorter release since we did have one last April, but we did get some really important capabilities into the release. One of the key areas we did focus on, as I touched on briefly, is around Python. And we'll get into that a little bit more. I have a few more details on that. This is something that was highly requested by our customer base. For those of you that may be aware, we do have an idea portal where you can go in and ask for new capabilities, and we take a look at those on a regular basis. Number one by far was the request for Python. So we'll be getting into that a little bit. And it's going to enable a lot of solutions, which we'll get into more detail on. Another area, and we're seeing this in the industry more and more, where a lot of our customers are trying to offload some of their IT infrastructure into the cloud. So we do realize it's not a one solution fits all, but the idea here is that you can run our software in the cloud, and we'll get into a little more detail on just some different ways of doing that as well. So sorry, I just had a glitch on what I was talking through there. I'm not sure what happened, but and then the other area again is around we continue to just add incremental enhancements to our core system. We did do some enhancements to our alarm system, and we're going to continue to not only provide some of the bigger, newer things, but also continue to address smaller items that you may have. So again, that's where that idea portal is. If you guys can leverage that and let us know kind of the areas where you see areas of improvement, I'll call them, that'd be great as well. So in the 2022 release, as mentioned, we did include Python scripting. And the idea here, again, the reason why we're doing it, and hopefully this kind of fits things that you guys are running into, but number one is, yeah, customers asked for it. You guys told us, hey, this is the one most important thing we want you guys to add to Simplicity. So we went ahead and did that. Some other feedback we've gotten from customers, things like, hey, our new guys don't know basic. And, I've heard this from integrators as well as from end customers. They bring in their new engineers from university, and guess what? They don't know basic. They know Python. That's what they learn there. So this is something they saw as helpful in terms of, being able to work with those new engineers that are coming into the workforce. The other thing is it really does increase the ability of what we can do from an extensibility perspective. And I'm going to have Doug go through some details in a bit on that. But, again, we know that we can't solve every problem with our software, every connectivity issue, those type of things. This is where Python really shines. There is just a large variety of pre-built tools out there that can be leveraged to really help solve some complex problems. And there's that large community of developers. There's open source libraries, all those things that you can leverage as well to really help you build that solution faster. And the other kind of key thing I'll just leave off with is analytics. It is the choice. This is the tool that most data scientists will use. So if you do have some initiatives around, whether it's digital transformation or looking at optimization and you want to start leveraging some analytics, this is one way to kind of dabble in that field as well. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Doug. He's going to talk about just kind of how we've integrated into Simplicity and just some of the use cases that it really can help you with. Doug?
Sorry while I go off. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as Jimmy said, we took our Python integration and looked at the typical use cases, and we fashioned the Python use cases to the Python integration to help facilitate those use cases. And as an example of that, we included a large selection of Python libraries that help with interconnecting to other systems, whether that's MQTT, ODBC libraries, REST APIs. We've got the Python libraries to do that we've vetted and included with our distribution of Python. We also looked at some of the patterns that you would need for doing analytics or connecting to other systems and incorporated that into our integration with Python. So every event action that you've got configured in the system that runs Python will end up with its own object instance. So we create a Python object that you can extend, adding your own methods and members and variables to just persist state that is there between executions of the action for the event action tuple. And we provided an initialization method as part of that template, and also a shutdown method and a method that executes every event action every time the event triggers. So what the initialization allows you to do is if you're doing analytics, load any kind of model data that you need in the initialization, or any just general purpose connections to external systems that can be taken care of during initialization. And then you can utilize that every time the event triggers. And then also during shutdown, you can clean up the connections or serialize any kind of persistent state that you would want to load, at the time of shutdown. You can make sure that's saved so you can load it whenever you start back up. So we've taken that view of the whole life cycle of the Python object and made sure that we've got integrations for you to utilize in the integration with Python. And all the simplicity features, the point data, the alarms, the configuration object model, we've ensured that we have very friendly Python libraries that Simplicity has generated so that you can easily integrate Simplicity in with your Python scripts. So, and we've focused a lot of that on performance. So we've got batch methods for doing set points, for reading points, for adding them to the system, and made sure that we've got good performance with the integration with the Simplicity data plane through those APIs.
All right, thanks, Doug. Yeah.
And, our
Go
Python
ahead.
scripts can integrate with our classes and objects. They support all the execution models, so you can create Python objects that can run in parallel threads at the same time, and sequential or in our thread pool for the event manager.
So Doug, on that, actually, I mean, maybe you can speak a little bit to how you could leverage that concept to actually have an analytic on an object as well, or a piece of equipment, as an example. Yeah.
So let's say you've designed a class that has a certain set of data members that are going to always be there, and you can incorporate an event on whenever those data members change, or when alarms are triggered for that class object, and have those scripts execute for those trigger actions. And when the first time those trigger, you get to initialize your class, load some data that you would need, and then execute during the event. During a data change, you could update your predictive model. You could create a digital twin and make sure that the inputs that you're tracking are tracking to the expected values. And if anything occurs, you can use the alarm APIs. If there's a deviation between the expected state and the monitored state, you can raise alarms through our alarm APIs. And finally, if there's any updates to that, the data you've collected that would mean your analytic model would need to change, you can save those off, or any other connected systems that you're communicating with, you can also tell them, hey, I'm going away now. And so they know that you're in an offline state.
Great, thanks, Doug. So yeah, so kind of summary there is the Python integration with Simplicity is really going to help. It can help solve a lot of additional problems with your system. So the other area where we kind of had a little bit of focus, as I mentioned previously, was around cloud deployments. And I'm not going to go through the little diagrams in detail here. Really, what I kind of wanted to emphasize here is, we tested it from a solution perspective. So we looked at Simplicity, Historian, Web Space, Operations Hub, all the components that you might have in your system. And really the idea here is it's very flexible, because there is no one answer for everybody. You may, in the way some of our customers approaching it are, really to help them save infrastructure costs. And the way they're doing it is they're saying, hey, if it's a less critical system, let's throw it in the cloud. It means I don't have to buy hardware. I don't have to manage hardware. It's all managed in the cloud, where they might still leave some SCADA servers, as an example, on premise, just for high, more critical systems that they can't afford the loss of cloud connection on. So everything in the cloud to just partially in the cloud, we can support, and we do have some documentation on our documentation site that you can reference as well with that. Just sort of the other area, I kind of talked a little bit about Simplicity and its performance. Hopefully, the people on this call have all been able to leverage it. But one of the things that we continue to look at is how do we even increase performance more? One of the things with simplicity, as I mentioned, the footprint can be very small on a small application or a simple local HMI, but it could also act as an enterprise SCADA. So when you start getting into those enterprise applications, if you're collecting data from multiple systems or multiple sites even, that's really where simplicity can also shine for you. So again, just wanted to kind of touch on that. The other thing is security. We do take security seriously. It's ingrained in how we do our development. It's part of our development process. So one of the things that we want to make sure that you guys do know that we do security scans, defense in depth. We do offer things like high encryption for even the communications and things like that. And our web applications do support the TLS layers. We also have some standards that we've implemented, notably IEC 27001 and the IEC 62443, which we will be actually doing an update on this year as well. But the point here is just, again, if you do have concerns around some of the security or vulnerabilities and things like that, we do have a secure deployment guide available, which gives you some reference architectures. And really what these standards talk to is the fact that we do have a vulnerability response process. So when vulnerabilities do happen, on the rare occasion, we do have a response process to get those addressed quickly. So just some things to note there. Just some other things just to touch on. We won't get into a lot of detail on some of these things today, but we do have the multiple options for visualization with simplicity. So we do have our traditional viewer. We do support terminal services, so you can do remote access of your entire system. And we also do web space, which is our solution to take your existing displays and make them available through browsers and on tablets, mobile phones, et cetera. And what I wanted to touch on also is we have our Operations Hub product, which really does complement our SCADA solution in that, we can get the data in there and you can use it for higher level dashboards and things like that. And we will be adding more capability with that as we move forward as well. One of the things that we did recently is you can create high level KPI views as an example. And I do have some on this where you can actually embed the simplicity graphics in our Operations Hub displays. So you can build those higher level applications and still access your existing displays that you have created with your simplicity system. So if you'd like more information on that, the Automatec team will definitely be able to help you on that.
And we do have before we move on,
Sure.
we do have a poll question.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you.
What are your biggest simplicity challenges? And you can answer, it's a multiple choice here.
Yep, thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for the reminder. I missed that.
Another 10 seconds here. Okay.
All right.
And here are the results.
It's a little bit of a mixed bag, but it looks like migrating and getting data from other systems. So I think those are two things that the team on this call can definitely help with, and the Automatec team can help with. So, in terms of how to get to the new version and how to, interface with other systems, we can definitely provide some help with that. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Tom, and he's going to cover Historian.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Jensen. Some of you may know me from previous years. I originally ran my own company for 12 years, worked for GE for about 22, and been here at Automatec for 4. So that does add up to a lot of years. One of the things that, is this right away into a poll here?
Oh, yeah, there is another poll question here.
All
Yeah,
right.
so let's start with the poll here. All right, so how are you using Historian today? Okay, there are 10 seconds here. Okay. Here are the results.
All right.
Several people not using Historian. We'll have to work on that. Some of the things to keep in mind is that Historian's included with each of your simplicity systems. So you can get using it pretty easily. Let's go to the things that we're going to try to cover.
Awesome.
That's all right. We can start here. What is the main reasons that I would use Historian? I mean, if I look at Historian, to me, it's the easy button. I've got integrated configuration of all the point data, the logging, the write access, permissions, things like that can all be done from the simplicity side. You can configure each tag to have independent security limits so that people can't read stuff that they're not permitted to read or control or see. You can also use Python for analytics, both in the simplicity as well as Historian. Historian's got a calculation collector that allows you to use Python. Probably the biggest thing I hear from people that are using SQL Server or other databases is the need for constant maintenance and feeding. Somebody's got to deal with the logs. Somebody's got to be able to deal with the backups of the live data. All of that's basically built in with Historian. You can do that with no real DB training. You don't have to understand transaction logs, things like that. And for those customers that really want to log to Historian for some data and other data go to SQL Server, you can log to both simultaneously. You can have any mix or match. You can actually also add other data sources in there as well. So you can kind of have the best of both worlds. One of the areas that shine with Historian is DGR, or digital graphical replay. It's really optimized for high-speed data recovery or playback, and Historian does that better than nothing else. SQL Server will function and you can do it, but if you're trying to bring back 10 or 20,000 points and replay them and want to go back and forth fast speed and pause and things like that, you're going to want to be able to retrieve that data quickly. Well, again, Historian is probably the easy button for doing that. Next slide, please. Yep. Historian has been around for many years. It's been at least 20 plus years. It's got tags, scaled counts up to 10 million or 100 million tags. I know that GE Aviation uses it for monitoring their entire fleet of turbines and engines throughout their deployments. It's a very large tag count. Whenever you're dealing with things like SSDs or things where you're trying to put more space, information into a smaller space, Historian's great. It stores the data roughly 33 times more efficiently or less disk space than SQL Server for the equivalent data. Again, there's automated integration or improved integration. We've always had integration with our other products, but as we move the other ones forward to the 2022 release, we've got increased and improved integration with Config Hub, Proficy installer, authentication, et cetera. So the UAA is greatly simplified. And then there's also a lot of improvement in some of the performance on the simplicity collector specifically. We've clocked it at over 150,000 points per second coming in with changes without any problems. So again, with the ability to bring in the asset model and use your objects and other items within Ops Hub and Simplicity, you can build a contextualized model throughout the system. Next slide, please. So again, the goal for Proficy 22 Historian is scaling to large deployments. It's also for distributed local deployments. If you want to have localized mirror nodes, you can have small data collections at remote RTUs or remote stations and have that aggregate and distribute across your enterprise. We wanted to also enhance the value, the extraction of the data. There's been a lot of improvement in some of the OPC UA and the REST connectivity. Again, Python-based collector, and again, a 10 times performance improvement compared to what earlier versions. We've also added a Delta query mode that makes it a lot easier to get the difference between values. And again, sped up deployments through enhancing the performance. We've also added encryption over the wire and moved the calculation collector to be multi-threaded. Next slide, please. With that, we're going to introduce Steve again. Steve and I are going to talk about high availability SCADA, and it's going to be focusing on Stratus. Steve, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Great job, guys. Really appreciate the thoughts and comments on the past couple of subjects. So next slide, Jimmy, please.
Yep.
All right. So this really is all about, we get asked by customers a lot around, hey, how do I virtualize? How do I do high availability clustering? How do I do standalone servers? And then how do I do high availability systems that automatically have failover options, et cetera? So this chart really just kind of shows the options that are out there. And, you know, the norm today is really virtualization of your applications and running a VM on a server someplace. So we see that pretty common. If you're not at that stage, like, it's going to make your life a heck of a lot easier than just running on a native server, especially when you think about disaster recovery, backup servers that you want to run and move forward. Then you get into high availability clustering, and then the standalone server, and then really your best options. And we see, you know, high availability options in a lot of different applications for simplicity. So if you're a small to medium-sized municipality or utility where you don't have an army of IT people, you want to have systems that literally alert you when there's issues. When you have a hard drive failure of an SSD and it's about to go down, you want to make sure you've got that failover happening immediately. And from a supply chain perspective, you want to make sure that your vendor is already sending something over to you to replace that component that went bad, right? So one of the things that we have fallen in love with, and our customer base has told us this, is really using some of the Stratus servers because we think they are truly best in class. So Jimmy, next slide. So we see, you know, some of the industries, and I just mentioned water, wastewater, and utilities, but we see, you know, some of the industries out there like oil and gas, food and bev, and transportation as some of the core markets where people are using high availability servers. And then from an application solution perspective, when you think about SCADA applications that we've talked about, as well as manufacturing execution, we see CMMS applications or asset management applications from the plant floor running on high availability servers. So really it's, you know, from the data center to the edge, we see a lot of applicability for high availability applications. So Tom, I'll have you cover the next couple of slides and we'll go from there.
Sure. So Stratus really kind of fits in probably level 4 and lower. You've got a lot of customers. We may not necessarily sell to finance or ERP, but we've got customers that are definitely running Stratus, excuse me, to handle their in-house SAP workload, or financial institutions. A lot of our customers find that on any form of high availability system that involves redundancy or needs to have redundancy or 100% uptime, or as near to it as you can get, we're going to recommend a Stratus of one form or another. We've got anything from dual rack mount up to 640 gig per CRU, or custom over replaceable unit, all the way down to something that'll run 4 or 5 VMs and fit in your control panel in something no larger than the size of, say, 2 large cooking books, something like that, or a dictionary. They really fit in well. Automated response for maintenance items, alerts, things like that. You can't really beat it. I mean, the notifications, case management, Stratus is set up to respond ahead of time when they start to get the warning indicators, say smart errors from the hard drive about lifespan or something. They will notify you and start shipping or cross-shipping a replacement unit. So a lot of industrial things at level 3 and lower. Next slide. So again, this is real kind of an eye opener. Stratus really's got 4 of the 5 largest credit card networks use Stratus. Half of the Fortune 100, as well as half the world's retailers. So the amount of industries that are covered by these guys have got a reputation that we want in our pocket. We want to put on our solutions for you, the customer. Thank you.
All right.
So let's open it up to any questions, and then we had a couple summary slides, and then in about 1 minute to 2 minutes, we'll turn it back over to Rachel. So any questions out there, Jess or Jen, at this point?
Yeah, we did have a few that came through. So one came in from Bill. How easy is it to migrate from version 9 to version 11?
I couldn't take that one. It's real
You want
easy.
to take that, Tom? Go ahead. Yeah.
It's real easy. The norm in more than almost all cases is you just click on it and open it up with the new version. It will automatically convert it. We state that you want to be within the last 2 versions, but I constantly do it from anything from version 3 on up. Works real easy. And well, if you have any problems, just give me a call or send us an email, somehow get hold of us and we'll work you through it.
Okay, great. One more question came in from John. He asks, how do I configure Simplicity to log points into Historian?
I can do that one too.
Yeah, you want to do it, Tom? Go ahead. It's easy, right? You're going to tell them how easy it is. Yeah.
Without showing you a screen, basically, if you go into the workbench or in the point control panel, you can select or shift click, select multiples, right click, and there'll be an option for log to historian. So you can apply it to one tag or to an entire group or all of the tags simultaneously, just by right clicking your selection.
That's great. Hey, it looks like we also had another one from Edith. So Edith, thanks a lot for the question. Will you share the presentation slides online? So the answer is yes, we'll share the slides, and this is also recorded. So the entire recording is available for the folks that have registered for this seminar. So that's great. Thank you. Any other questions, Jen?
Yeah, we'll take one more. And then if we haven't gotten to your question, we will address them with you directly after the presentation. So this one that came in is, do I automatically get the Historian Essentials when I upgrade to the latest version, or do I have to ask for it?
Good question. So the answer is it can be included. It's usually by default, but if you can definitely ask for it. Basically, by default, we ship Essentials with as part of the licenses with Simplicity. But just to be safe, it's okay to request and just make sure that the checkbox gets selected when they're doing the ordering.
Okay, great. I'd like to just ask one more that came through, if that's okay.
Sure.
Is there a document that lists what comes in the standard version of Simplicity versus the Pro Server version? How many historian points come with a Simplicity license? Also, what drivers and other options?
Yeah, so we do have a document on our support site that does have that. In sort of at a high level, there is when with every Simplicity server, we include the Historian Essentials, as mentioned, that we talked about already, which varies basically, the number of tags you get varies by the size of the system. And then drivers, all our base drivers are included. So those are just your Modbus and Rockwell and some of the other really common ones. And then beyond that, we have the IGS that's available for purchase for kind of the over 200 protocols. And then in terms of the options, this is where the Pro Server comes into play. We've got options for things like statistical process control, the DGR, functions like that. What happens is when you go to the Pro Server, a lot of those are included with the Pro Server version. So frankly, the price difference between the two, it's almost worth just buying Pro Server all the time, because the individual price of an option is almost the price of the Pro Server as well. But yeah, we do have a list available on our support site. And yeah, of course, if you do have any specific questions on that, just reach out as well.
And Jen, we've got a lot more questions coming in. Is it something where we can send out answers to everyone's questions after the fact so that we can give Rachel a few minutes with our wine?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let's Jimmy, let's move
Yeah,
on
sure.
to, the last slide. And then just really quickly, if anybody has any questions, we've dedicated an email alias to simplicity.support@automatech.com. Just give us a call, send us an email. I'd love to help and assist anybody out there for sure. And then we're gonna ping you guys at a later date on an exclusive offer that we're having. If you're not using a historian, we'll make that available, and we'll follow up with that. Next slide. And so we do have some up and coming events that are going to be happening, and just please note that. And with that, I just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve. Thanks to all of you for joining. We have a couple minutes to talk about the wine. As I mentioned earlier on in my intro, if you haven't received a bottle of wine, if you registered maybe last minute or you weren't home to take delivery, you can open up whatever it is that you have at home. I'm going to kind of walk through how to taste using this specific wine as my example, but it holds true for every kind of wine, any kind of wine that you might have in front of you. So as I mentioned earlier, we are drinking a Barolo today, and just depending on where you live, your producer might be different than mine. I'm drinking a Ratty 2017 Barolo. This is one of my favorite wines in the world. Not necessarily this producer, I do really like this producer, but just this type of wine. One of my favorite red wines, and I love to talk about it. One of the most food-friendly wines. It's great for food and wine pairing, and it's just really long-lived and a wine that ages very well too. So we're going to talk a bit about the region, then we're going to taste through it, and I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about food and wine pairing as well. So the region of Barolo the region of Barolo is within a greater region called Piedmont in the northwest of Italy. So if you're looking at Italy like the boot, it's the top left-hand part of Italy. Of course, Old World, which would be France, Italy, and Spain, they label their wines by region rather than grape varietal. So Barolo is the name of the region within Piedmont. You'll also see a couple other words on your label, just depending on what bottle you have in front of you. This one is Marcenasco, so that's the name of the commune within Barolo. And essentially, the more words on the label, the more delineated the region, and really the more expensive the wine at a certain point. Most Barolos, all Barolos, are going to have what you see here, this tag where it says DOCG. So that is kind of a quality control indicator. It's the highest level of quality and oversight of wines coming out of Italy. So you have DOCs and you have DOCGs. DOCGs are, the method, the production, the viniculture, and the viticulture is really overseen by wine law in Italy. So it's really heavily controlled. There's lots of oversight, and producers have to follow certain methods, really strict methods of production. So you really know you're going to get a good bottle of wine if you see that DOCG label right there. So the region itself, besides being in the northwest part of Italy, you have a lot of sand and clay soils. Now, the grape varietal that is kind of the king of this region, and the grape varietal that's used to make Barolo, is Nebbiolo. So it's known as the king of Italian red wine grapes. You'll see Nebbiolos coming out of other regions in the world as well, but really this is the region and the area where the grape is native to, and where I think its truest expression really comes out. The vineyards in Barolo are southern facing vineyards, which is optimal for wine growing. And as I mentioned, they're those sandy clay soils. So the name of the grape Nebbiolo actually comes from the Italian word for fog, nebbia. And they say that's either because of this kind of white dust that settles on the grapes. It's a bloom that settles that looks kind of like a fog. Or also there is a fog that rolls in. These are very fragile grapes, and that fog that rolls in protects the grapes during the growing season. So there are two reasons why Nebbiolo might be named Nebbiolo after that Italian word for fog. Barolo itself has aging requirements. So the producers can't just make this wine and then, once it's done fermentation, bottle it and sell it. They have to age it, dependent on if it's a Reserva or just a base level Barolo, for a certain number of years. Just your average bottle of Barolo, where it's not labeled as a Reserva, is going to have to be aged in barrel for 3 years. And then the aging requirements just get more and more strict and longer as we go up the ladder of quality to Grand Reserva. So most of you are probably drinking a Barolo, and that was aged a minimum of 3 years in barrel. So just dependent on the producer, they will either use new oak, which will impart, really oaky kind of vanilla and chocolatey kind of flavor, or they're going to use used French oak, which is kind of the traditional way of aging Barolo. You have two camps of producers in Barolo. They're kind of split. You have the more modern style where they use that new oak, they extract more fruit. It's going to be a more fruit forward wine. And then you have the more old fashioned producers that really let the wine speak for itself, and the terroir, which is the French word for kind of the personality of the wine, really comes through at that point. So we just have a couple of minutes, so I want to kind of taste you through this glass. First, one thing that is really kind of special to Nebbiolo as a grape is the color. It has almost this brick-like orange to it, and it's totally see-through. So it's not going to be opaque like your Zinfandels or your Cabernet Sauvignons. You can totally see through this wine. It's a true ruby red at the core, but it definitely has almost a brick tinge to it. And that is really quintessential to the grape. You also have Sangiovese that kind of has that orangey note to it as well. So these two grape varietals are really known for that. When you swirl it in your glass, kind of just watch for the way that it coats your glass. That tells us a lot about the alcohol content. So here I definitely see tears falling. They're falling fairly slow, but not super slowly. So I would venture to say this is medium plus in alcohol. And let's check our bottle. Usually it's there. And this one's actually 14% alcohol. So that's definitely medium plus to high in alcohol. They're allowed about 0.5% of leeway when it comes to labeling. Now I'm going to go ahead and smell, and I'll let you know what I smell from the Barolo. If anybody smells anything that jumps out of the glass at them, I'm going to type it in the chat. I would love to hear it. So for me, I start with fruit, and I definitely smell really bright red fruit. So for me, it's always right off the bat, cherry is what I get with Nebbiolo and with Barolo. I definitely smell some raspberry and strawberry as well, but it's really driven by lots of cherry, right? Bright red fruit. Now, besides fruit flavors or fruit jumping out of the glass, if there's anything else, I get a lot of roses actually. So there's always this floral element to Nebbiolo that comes right after the fruit for me. And I get definitely a lot of rose. There's some leather. I get a little bit of chocolate here. And then a little bit of like a fennel or a black licorice. And that's also very common to smell in Barolo. There's a bit of almost like a tar, which doesn't sound really appealing, but it goes along with that fennel kind of black licorice smell. And it just adds to the complexity of the flavor profile of this wine. So I'm going to take a sip and I'm going to talk just really briefly about the structure of the wine. So the first thing that stands out to me, besides the bright red fruit that's really right up front, is the tannins. So the tannins are phenolic compounds, and Barolo is really well known for this. They're found in the skins as well as the seeds of grapes, and they just give your mouth that kind of drying sensation, right? So you feel like your tongue's a little bit fuzzy. And Barolo has a really high level of tannins, and that makes it really food friendly. So that is the first thing right off the bat. I can feel the tannins. I can also feel my mouth watering. So I know that this wine has a high level of acidity, which is awesome for food and wine pairing, both tannins and acidity. And that's because this region is farther north, right? So I mentioned it's the northwest part of Italy. So the temperatures, it doesn't get super hot. So it allows the grapes to retain that great level of acidity that makes it great for food and wine pairing. And again, I get all of those things that I got on the nose. So the floral notes, the fruit, a bit of complexity. I definitely get those on the palate as well. It's really a complex wine, very well balanced with the acid and the tannins. I definitely would recommend decanting this. I've had mine open for an hour, and I think it would even benefit from being open a bit longer to kind of mellow those tannins out just a bit and allow a bit more fruit to come forward. So if you have a decanter at home and you want to go ahead and pour that in and you have this wine for dinner, it'd be awesome. This wine's going to pair really nicely with, I think, any sort of red meat, because you have that high level of acid and tannin. Those things act as palate cleansers. So say you made a Delmonico and you took a bite and your palate was really kind of coated in fat. You took a sip of this wine, your palate's cleansed. Anything like a mushroom risotto, again, that's rich, and it's going to really coat your palate. And this bright, fruit forward but complex wine is going to do a great job of pairing with that risotto. So they say what grows together goes together. So if you're making any sort of pastas, any sort of Italian dish, it's going to also go very nicely with this Barolo. So I know we're out of time, so I don't want to keep anybody, but thank you so much to Steve and the rest of the team for having me. If you guys have any questions about wine, even if I don't get to them right now, you can send them in and I will absolutely follow up with an answer. And if you haven't received your wine yet, you registered maybe later, rest assured it is on the way. So keep an eye out for that bottle.
Hey, Rachel, thanks again. And for everyone that attended, on behalf of Automatec and GE, we really thank you very much for your time. And I hope everyone has a great evening. And Rachel, great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can we just throw that email address on the screen one more time? Jimmy, the previous slide that has the simplicitysupport@automatech.com. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, yep.
If anyone has questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help with any questions that didn't get answered or any that you think of later on. And also the promotion. Steve, I don't know if you want to elaborate any more or say anything else as people are slowly dropping off.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll follow up with an email with the promotion that we're going to be doing. And then we also captured a bunch of questions from people, and we will be sending those questions out to everyone. And we'll have Tom and the rest of our solution architects comment on those, and we'll get that out to all the attendees as well. So with that, I think we're going to say thanks again for joining, and I hope everyone has a outstanding Thursday evening. So thanks again for your time.
Hey, thanks, everyone.
Yep, bye.